Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another weapons verified video for Call of Duty World at War. Yes, 3 videos in 3 weeks, you wouldn't believe it. Alright, today we are going to take a look at a weapon that was quite unique at the start of the war and was the first of its kind as main armament for a whole national army. The United States rifle, caliber .30 M1, or more commonly known as M1 Garand. The development process that led to this outstanding rifle began directly after World War I. French-Canadian John C. Garand, who had only gone to school until the age of 11 and learned everything about tool making throughout his various jobs, had been working on a light machine gun together with firearms designer John Kuish. This came to an end together with the Great War. But Garand's talents had not gone unnoticed, and he was hired by Springfield Armory. Through the 1920s, the US Army was testing various semi-automatic rifle prototypes by Patterson, Thompson, and other competitors, including Garand. Throughout these trials, the .276 caliber cartridge developed by Patterson was favored at the beginning, and Garand adopted his initially primer-operated .30 rifle to gas-operated system and the new cartridge. Reworking his rifle multiple times, his prototype T3E3 was determined by the Ordnance Department in January 1932 to be better suited for the next war than the Patterson model. Shortly thereafter, though, the Army decided that it would not convert to the .276 cartridge and instead keep the .30-06 ammunition, which they had huge stocks of from the First World War. So Garand changed his design again, now labeled T1E2. In August 1934, the rifle had been redesignated again as M1 and gone into testing on the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. It took a lot of work to eradicate most of the flaws, but by January 1936, the M1 was officially approved as the new standard weapon of the US Army under the designation I mentioned at the beginning of the video, US Rifle Caliber .30 M1. Mass production began at Springfield Armory in August 1937 and steadily increased from 10 per day in the first month to 200 per day in January 1940. There were still a few flaws like jamming after 6 rounds and loose gas cylinder assembly and muzzle plug, but those were largely fixed by late 1939. With the beginning of the Second World War, production was stepped up massively, bringing total production numbers of the M1 up to over 4 million. It was extremely well liked by soldiers and Marines alike, including the initially reluctant higher-ranking officers like Patton, who called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. When Germany and Japan came into contact with US units armed with the gun, it sparked an immediate upstep in their semi-automatic rifle development, though only Germany was able to implement a more or less well-working one, the Gewehr 43, before the war ended. Production of the Garand was stepped up again with the beginning of the Korean War, pumping out another 1.5 million rifles. A lot were given to other nations like South Korea, France, and also the old enemies and new allies Germany, Italy, and Japan. It stayed in service in combat units well into the 1960s, and the Vietnam War in its sniper version. Until this day, some are in service with the US Reserve Officers Training Corps and ceremonial units, as it is in South Korea, the Republic of China, Japan, Turkey, and some other nations. Also various other nations and non-state actors still carry the M1 Garand to combat. The M1 is probably one of the best, maybe even the best, semi-automatic rifle ever made. It certainly increased the firepower of the US infantry squads greatly, helping them overcome their lack of light and general-purpose machine guns as the Germans deployed them en masse. While the German way of arming their squads had its own drawbacks, it was pretty effective on the defensive. With the continuous fire from the M1 Garand, GIs were able to put up a pretty good suppressive fire of their own to cover their attacks, and also had the upper hand one-on-one against the average German infantryman armed with the Karabiner 98K rifle, especially on close to medium range. By the way, the infamous myth, the distinctive ping of the clip being ejected caused US soldiers to get attacked while reloading, is exactly that, a myth. Not only did US infantry squads not empty all their rifles simultaneously, the reload was also pretty quick. On top of that, the ejection sound is far less loud than you would expect, and if you don't happen to stand on concrete or similar ground, nobody will hear the clip landing. Besides being a pretty good rifle for the average infantryman, the M1 also proved itself as a sniper rifle, and on top of that, if fitted with the M7 grenade launcher attachment, it could fire 22mm rifle grenades up to 200 meters or 220 yards. The M1 Garand served throughout World War II, the Korean War, and partially the Vietnam War with great distinction, rightfully earning its inventor a Medal for Meritorious Service and the Medal for Merit. Now, the question is, how realistic does the M1 Garand perform in the game? As you have just seen, the firing rate is insane. In around 30 seconds you are able to eat through more than 60 rounds, and your shots are highly precise on top of that with very low recoil. Now, a decently experienced US infantryman was able to fire off around 40 to 50 shots in a minute with this gun, so the firing rate is a bit over the top, especially if you take in consideration that you need to reload every 8 shots. Which is pretty easy and quick, as Phil assured me. But still, over 60 rounds in 30 seconds is, yeah, just insane. The stopping power is quite good, as it should be with this caliber. Usually 2 body shots take down an AI opponent, and your bullets are even able to punch through the Japanese helmets, as you only face Japanese in the game, as American. As the gun is semi-automatic, this makes it pretty easy to take down a group of enemies, especially with a quite nice recoil and precision. Though this is not really realistic in combination with the firing rate. The Garand was famous for being pretty precise and easy to keep on target though, even for recruits. But when you open up with 2 shots per second, which is technically impossible I think, even the M1 would jerk around quite a bit. So, if you shoot calm and concentrated without just hammering out shots, you are easily able to take repeated well-aimed shots at the enemy, making it an excellent medium-range rifle, just as in reality. A minor detail that caught my eye is the ejection animation for a partially emptied magazine. Some Call of Duty veterans might remember that you weren't able to reload the M1 in Call of Duty 2 unless you had completely emptied the magazine. This has always intrigued me greatly because it didn't make any sense. Here in Call of Duty World at War it is depicted correctly. Pull back the handle on the right, and then push the button on the left. Out goes the clip. A drop of bitterness remains sadly. Pulling back the handle should eject one of the remaining rounds. This sadly does not happen, and the ejected clip will be shown as empty. In total, I would say the M1 Garand is depicted more or less well in the game. The extremely high firing rate makes it a bit too good in close quarters, especially in combination with the low bullet spread. On medium and long range, and if shot with a lower firing rate, aimed properly, it works just as well as it did in the Second World War. That's it for today. Once more thank you to Phil for sharing his experience with yet another weapon with me, and believe me, on the next video he will give us something really special. Preparations for the Patreon launch are still going on. As I already said in the previous video, it will go online after the next History Gaming Verified video on Assassin's Creed, for which I'm actually also planning a Weapons Verified episode. Now I just need to find someone as knowledgeable on European and Near Eastern swords and sword fighting techniques as Phil's in modern firearms. Anyway, next up in this series are quite a few guns for the final Call of Duty World at War Weapons Verified Bullshit episode. 2 of which are these. Now, if you liked the video and want to see the next one, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Also, likes are always highly appreciated. For other videos from the Weapons Verified series, take a look here. For my other stuff, click right here. And that's it for today. All the best. See you on the next video.